Thank you guys for being here. My name is Jason Clodfelter. I'm the GIS manager with Davidson County, just down the road a little bit. I want to talk to you a little bit about how we've started utilizing Task in ArcPro. And just for my curiosity, how many of you guys are utilizing Task within ArcPro? Not a task scheduler or anything like that, using the actual task. Wow. Uh-oh. I wasn't either. I was not using them at all much until just within the last few months. So kind of want to talk to you a little bit about how I got to Task, why we're using them, go over a couple of specific use cases that I have found for us right now, and then what I believe are some of the benefits. So in the last, I'd say 18 months or so, the GIS staff in Davidson County has had a 100% staff turnover. We are part of IT. We are a two-person department. So in the fall of 2023, the analyst developer that we had for a number of years left. And then a couple months later in December, the longtime manager decided that she was going to retire. So I was able to come in. They hired me in. This week is my 1-year anniversary back at Davidson County, so yay for me. But as I walked in the door, a lot of things I noticed had kind of stagnated. And one of those being that many people that are dealing with, right, is the need to migrate from ArcMap to ArcPro. So we've got about 25 to 30 users that I would consider kind of a lower tier user that's utilizing ArcMap across tax planning and environmental health. When I say lower tier, I don't mean to degrade anyone or anything like that, but they're not power users. They're using it as a tool to kind of supplement their everyday needs, that type of thing. One of my hurdles was working with the planning department in that they had a specific tool that they said had to be rebuilt regardless, or they were not even going to entertain moving to ArcPro. And as I'm coming in as the manager, the developer analyst is gone, so I'm essentially a one-man shop. I'm the manager. I'm not a programmer. I'm not a developer. I can do some of it, but I am by no means consider myself an expert in Python or anything like that. So we had limited programming skills to try to build something new or unique. I walked in the door in March towards the end of a fiscal year. The budget for the next fiscal year had already been kind of set and approved, met, that type of thing. So I didn't have a lot of leeway budgetarily either. So I want to talk about specifically about this one tool that was my hurdle for migrating the planning department. It's what they call their adjoining owner tool. So they utilized this when they needed to notify all the property owners of a rezoning or a special use case and that kind of thing. Many years ago, this thing was developed, and I failed to mention, this is my second stint with Davidson County. I started my career there a number of years ago, and I was there when the tool was originally created using Microsoft Access, and we were using ArcView 3.2 at the time. Many of you probably don't even know what that is. But at any rate, over the years, that tool had been migrated to be used within ArcMap, still using Microsoft Access forms. And I say it was kind of held together by duct tape and baling wire, if you know what I mean. It was kind of barely hanging on. So again, needed to find another solution for this particular tool in particular, so I can migrate the staff of 7 with the planning department over to ArcGIS Pro. Again, with my limited experience and that kind of thing, I did reach out to some of the wonderful vendors that we have in the GIS community here, showed them what we had and what we were in need of, and I got a couple of proposals back that were over 23 grand. Again, remember my situation I was in with the budget, right? I didn't have much of any kind of leeway with this. So at this point, I kind of started to panic. new into the position, back into the county, needing to migrate a number of workers to ArcMap, and kind of run into this. So I was like, well, I can't really do anything fully with Python. I felt like some of the model builder piece may not fit exactly because I needed some more interactivity with the users. So basically, at a moment of what I call divine intervention, I remembered this little thing somewhere in the back of my head called Task that ArcPro had. So I started doing a little research into tasks, and also, of course, had to look for a replacement for the Microsoft Access. I did not want to use Access. I wanted to use something else if we could. So again, a lot of research, a lot of trial and error and that type of thing. So after a bit of a bit of that and some testing and whatnot, I was able to come up with what I've kind of renamed. Planning department still calls it their adjoining owner tool. I've renamed it kind of a property owner notification because I think it could be adapted to be used in multiple other departments if needed down the road. So I am utilizing Task in ARCGIS Pro, and I'm utilizing Microsoft form letters and mail merge within Microsoft Word, that kind of thing. So we are an Esri shop and we are a Microsoft shop. So I was able to kind of bridge the gap, use those two in conjunction with one another. So that the task itself does allow for a little interactivity with the users. They can come in and do some things, but then letting it kind of, ArtPro kind of run some of the more difficult and those type of things on its own that a lower tier user may not know how to do. Did have to do some training on mail merge. Took me a little bit to get up to speed on building the form letters and that kind of thing. So I'm not going to get into that side of it very much, but I do want to talk more about the task. So after development, trial and error, testing, I did go back to the planning department, provide this information to them, and they quickly adapted this new model of using tasks for their new process of being able to go in and with their new adjoining owner notification tool. And that allowed me to then help move the migration forward and then to go ahead and get them moving towards ArcGIS Pro. So I'm just going to kind of go some screenshots. This was my first task, so this is not overly impressive by any means. This one is pretty small and pretty simple to use. But when you're in ArcGIS Pro, if you go to insert, you can insert a new task and then you can start walking through. And I'll show a little bit of the back end in a moment. But for the user, when they go into the project, opening this particular task, this is what they're faced with. You can see in the upper left, we've got the the adjoining notification tool with the little arrows allows them to open the task. We can provide some information down here in the lower part as well. So they simply you'll walk them through basically in the process. So step one, you're telling the user what to do. In this case, they're going to go and use the select tool to select their properties. And then they simply, once they do that, they simply press the next button to run. It's going to initiate the second step. This second step in this case, simply doing an export of all those attribute information from the parcels to Microsoft Excel, which is the basis for the entire mail merge and process there. So again, they're looking at this. I've kind of keyed them in and say, hey, make sure that this number looks right. If you're expecting to notify or get information from 10 parcels and this says 100, you might want to back out, do your selection over again, that kind of thing. So just keying them in again, then they press run. This is something that should have been baked in to do on its own afterwards. I'll show you another task in a minute, but basically now I've got another step. Hey, after you've done that, clear this selection, so you just run this so that they're ready to run the next process should they choose to. The next steps for them, with Davidson County Planning Department, not only do they have jurisdiction in the unincorporated areas in the county, we're also contracted with 2 of the smaller municipalities in the county for planning and zoning services. So depending on the jurisdiction that this request is coming from, they have a little bit slightly different letter that needs to be generated for those property owners. So in this case, we're showing if this is for the county itself, then the user would simply go ahead and hit run. If this was for one of those other neighboring or one of the other jurisdictions, they could simply skip this, go to the next one, and then hit run at that point. So got a little bit of Python. I told you I could do a little bit. I got a little bit of Python in there that's calling the appropriate letter, notification letter at that time when behind the scenes on the run here. All right, and then the final step in this, specific for the planning department, for their records keeping purposes, they just wanted to generate a list of those adjoining owners that they've notified. So property, like the parcel ID, the ownership, and the mailing information, that kind of thing, just again for record keeping for them. So last step, they do this and run. And essentially at this point, they're done with this particular part of the process. So if you're not familiar with tasks, a little bit behind the scenes, tasks are essentially made up of individual steps. So when you go to create a task, you will give it a name and that kind of thing, and then you start creating the steps that you want to be a part of that task. Each step has different behavior. You can set it to be manual, which I did on that first one. They had to click and move forward every time they were ready to go to the next step. As you'll see in a moment, later processes I've learned set up some more of the auto proceed and the automatic kind of things. So each step has a different step behavior that you can assign to it, and the steps can do any of the geoprocessing stuff, the commands, getting attributes. And another thing that I found very helpful is this little button right here, which will allow you to record, kind of record your own steps or your, excuse me, your own clicks. And I'll explain that again in a moment. So behind the scenes, with this particular one, only 7 steps in combination with the Microsoft Office form letters. And the end result then is an individual customized letter, if you will, for each property owner that needed to be notified. We've got at the top, you got the type of rezoning, in this case, the notice of rezoning, the parcel and ownership information, a description of the property, the description of the request for the rezoning that needs to take place, which board is hearing it, dates, times, all that kind of stuff. So the end result is this nice thing that now they have already in a PDF format for historical purposes for Laserfish, and then for printing for mailing to the property owners. Another part of this, again, not wanting to get much into the weeds on this piece of it, but again, in this case, utilizing Microsoft Office and the form letters and that kind of thing. So as they go through the mail merge, some of the things where you see choose a notice, choose an item, or click to enter a date, all those are things that they will choose at the very beginning on the form letter. They're drop downs or their date pickers that we built in. And then once those are set, then they will go ahead and start their mail merge process. And at that point, they'll be prompted by a series of boxes to fill in some of the additional information. So additionally, they will then prompt or key in who the request is being made by, type in the property description, type in the rezoning request or whatever that request is and that kind of thing. So again, you get back to, after all that part is done, then again, you're back to this kind of final product. So moving forward a few months, we get to the latter part of 24, and as we move into 25, had a couple of folks in the tax office that, again, I need to get migrated over to ARCGIS Pro. They are our tax deferment specialists for the present use value program. If you're not familiar with that, it's a program where the property owners get a reduction in their taxes if they are using it for farming purposes or have it enrolled in the forestry management plan and that kind of thing. So historically, Davidson County, we've got 2 folks that do this, and they've been doing it kind of by heads-up digitizing, if you will. They're using a measure tool in ArcMap and kind of just drawing a little polygon. Then they would add some text as a graphic right there on the map. So if you open up their MXD and look at it, to me, it's just crazy because they've got notes and graphic polygons and things all over the place. If you think about that, an individual that's doing a measurement kind of thing, if they go back to do that same process a second time, they're likely to not get the same answer. If another individual in the department tries to do the same calculation on the same property using this method, again, likely not to get the same answer. Again, they're not doing any editing, they're just doing graphics and that kind of thing. So again, it's not easy to measure, and not easily repeatable. Then a lot of times they're using the snooping tool to generate their map that they would put in their file and that kind of thing. So again, as I mentioned earlier, kind of a lower tier user. So I wanted to not only get them to move to ArcGIS Pro, but I wanted to help kind of advance a little bit about how they do their work, make it more repeatable, defendable, that type of thing. I harken back to working with a task for planning department, and so I started delving into it to try to come up with a task that could kind of go through this whole process. And I won't get into a ton of details on this one, but whereas that previous task that we just looked at had 7 steps, and each one was they did one and they hit run, they did one and they hit run, they did one and they hit run. I now have a test for our deferment specialist, a task that is now, as of last week, up to 32 steps. But the only one that they have to do anything on is the very first one. They select their parcel and they hit run. And then it will go through all these series of different geoprocessing type things and whatnot. I don't have all of the steps on the screen, but towards the bottom you'll see some of this edit layout, activate map frame. If you're familiar with Pro, you know, when you go to the layout side, you got to activate your map frame and do all that. That's where this record came in very handy. So I could, you know, put all these steps in to configure the geoprocessing tool and that kind of thing, but then utilizing the record to go over to layout, activate the layout, zoom to the appropriate parcel and that kind of thing, and then come back out. It came in very, very handy. And so the end result, as far as the map is concerned, is something that looks like what's on the right side of the screen. The parcel, they got their parcel number, the date that it was done, that kind of thing. They can add notes should they choose to. Went a step further with this one because they need all the calculations in this case. So in this case, utilizing the reports feature of ARCGIS Pro, which again, if you're not familiar with that, I would recommend that you look into that as well. But using the reports feature, I was able to generate a multi-page report for each parcel for all the soil classifications. They want it for the soil classifications, if it's in ag, if it's in forestry, if it's in horticulture. They want it broken down by zoning district as well. And they need to know how much of that property has tree coverage on it. So we're doing the calculations for all of that. That's what's going on in all of those 32 steps. It's kind of behind the scenes. So the user now goes in Pro, they use the locate, find their parcel, they hit run, then they do whatever they want to for 1.5 minutes, 2 minutes until it's done. And then they're able to export the map, export this report, and then they can go do what they need to do to key the information into the CAMA system and move on to the next process. So they're still learning this right now. I've still just finalized some of the training with them over the past week or so. So I don't have an exact quantifiable number as far as how much time or whatever this may save them. But I have been told that will save them at least 50 to 75% time that they take on every one parcel from the way they were doing it to go to here. Plus, they like the fact that it's repeatable, defendable, and they've got something that when a property owner comes in, they have all this to show them and that kind of thing. So it helps, you know, their whole process with moving forward and that kind of thing. So from my perspective on doing this, what I have found is that as a GIS professional, someone who's maybe a little bit higher level user, the tasks are pretty easy to create. No coding required, that kind of thing, although you can do some coding in there with some Python and whatnot. And these are great for lower tier GIS users. Again, they need to have some interactivity with it, but they don't necessarily need to know the ins and outs of how everything is working and why it's working and that kind of thing. You can accomplish sophisticated type tasks. I think it's pretty easy to use, pretty straightforward. You're walking them through that. Again, I'd say repeatable, defendable. I use that a lot. And then just generating some high quality products in the end. I talked a little bit about the workflow efficiency and potential cost savings. If you think back at the beginning of the presentation with the adjoining owner one, it was going to cost the county at least a minimum of $23,000 to try to get another product brought in to do what they were doing. That through tasks, in that case, form letters and mail merge, we're able to do it in-house, save that cost savings that I could then use for my ISRI licensing. But I think that's about it. Yeah. So I think there's a couple more minutes or so left. So we'll try to answer any questions if there are any.
6 minutes for questions.
Yes.
So you mentioned, a little bit of Python coding here and there. Did you end up creating, very small, did you end up creating like actual script tools to use as part of the tasks, or was it just like in the Python inside ArcPro?
Yeah, it was just with those couple of steps, using a little bit of code to call the specific letters in that case.
Okay,
so
you didn't necessarily create a new tool, new geoprocessing?
Correct.
Is that an option, do you know, that you can pull in custom tools that have been created?
I would assume so.
Okay.
Yeah. Again, this is early on, so this was, I started with this in June of last year, so this is very new, to me as well. So just kind of explaining and showing what I do know, which is still, frankly, a little bit limited with it. But did I see another? Yes.
Jason, okay, you mentioned
I don't know because I haven't tried it. I would.
Repeat what somebody
Oh,
asked
yeah, sure.
for the recording.
Yeah, so in this case, the question was, can you incorporate Model Builder into any of the tasks? Honestly, I don't know. I have not tried that. Again, these two specific purposes I had was looking to try to alleviate some pressure on the lower tiered users. I would say that there's got to be a way to do that, but I don't know. I haven't tried that. Yes.
I imagine you have multiple users probably using these tasks. Is it easy to transfer the task to other users, or do you have to recreate the task?
So you can, the question was, how easy is it to transfer the task to another user? That has also been a little bit of a challenge in learning, but yes, you can export the task and then import that somewhere else. Just be mindful if they are, if you've got different path names or different paths on different servers or something like that, you may have to go in and repoint to the, the specific location of the data and that kind of thing. I thought I had that figured out when I was setting it up originally, and then I went over to the tax office and pulled it up, and some of the stuff didn't work right. But yes, so you can import and export, but you do want to be mindful of that if you're looking at different shared drives or servers and that kind of thing. No.
Would you say that this would be easier to implement in a desktop environment as opposed to implementing something that would be web-based to accomplish the same thing?
For our specific purpose, probably so. And again, with the what we needed to do here and to be able to generate those reports and what the knowledge that I have of being able to do that in a web application, I think this is an easier product and it's easier to handle. And part of my motivation too was to be able to move them onto Pro and that kind of thing. Right. So some of the response that I got back from the vendors where they were looking at doing something to replace that adjoiner owner tool in a web type application. But again, we were able to do it in this direction. Of course, by no means is this the only way, right? And I'm not at all saying that Task is better than Model Builder, is better than Python scripts or anything like that. Just another option, depending on your need, depending on your users, depending on what you're trying to do. But it has proven to be very helpful for us. I'm actually utilizing it now a little bit, kind of on an interim basis. We're going through an upgrade process right now. In addition to our migration to Pro, we're upgrading to Enterprise and that kind of thing. So some monthly tasks that we have, I've switched to do or monthly updates, I've switched to utilize Task in an interim period until we get over to our new Enterprise, which will then be probably a different format. So, I would highly recommend giving it a shot. The more I use these, the more I like it. And the one specifically for the present use value, for that user to be able to find their parcel and then everything. I mean, it's really, they have not been able to say enough praise about what this does for them in their work. So, yes. And so right now, the version of Pro that we're using right now is 3.1.4. I did a little testing with 3.3. We had some hiccups a few weeks ago after a Windows update. Some of you may have. And so I started looking at, but I didn't want to do that yet. So we're waiting until after our upgrade, and then we will be migrating upward to a newer version of Pro. Which version, I'm not sure yet. And some of it may be dependent on how some of these things work. Yes.
How did you end up getting the tasks from one computer to the other? Are you exporting a project file? Within Art Pro itself, you can export, and there's an Esri tag. I can't remember what the exact extension is. File
Yeah, but there's an extension there in just file format yet, and you can
just send it to the user and they can import, open it in Pro.
Yeah, in Pro, if you go up to Insert, you can either add a new task or import a task, and so you can import from there. Yes.
That workflow that you did for present use
Mhm.
obviously would have value to almost any tax office. Are those steps something that you developed? Or is that something that you can share out?
Yeah, I should be able to share it out. Yeah, so it's a combination. My career early on was in tax, and so I've worked with tax off and on over the years. In a previous career, I worked in Forsyth County that had done tried to attempt something similar before tasks were a thing in Pro, and they were utilizing QGIS and Python to do some things. they were kind enough to share that information with me, but again, I'm looking at thousands of lines of Python code thinking, this ain't gonna happen. So I had to pivot and try something else, so that's how I ended up on this, but yes, I'll be more than happy to share that.